This is Jennifer Weiss with the Climate Action Reserve. I wanted to welcome everybody to this webinar, but I especially wanted to welcome our panelists. This is actually our second shot at presenting this very important topic. This was originally scheduled as a session for our annual conference, North American Carbon World. And as it goes with many virtual events, we ran into some technical difficulties. So a special thank you to all of these panelists for their willingness to rejoin us once again so that we can actually have this important conversation. And I'd like to turn it over to Joel Levin with Plug in America, who is moderating this session. So Joel, welcome back once again, and thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you for having me back. So this is our rescheduled session on creating a decarbonized transportation sector. So I'm the executive director of Plug in America, which is, if you're not familiar with us, we're the National Association of Electric Vehicle Drivers. And I will be the moderator for this session for the next hour. And so I want to start by posing some questions to the panelists, and then we'll take questions from the audience. So feel free to type your questions into the chat box, and we will try to get to as many as we can. So I first want to introduce our panelists. We have Analisa Bevan, who is the Assistant Division Chief for Sustainable Transportation and Communities Division at the California Air Resources Board. She oversees the development and implementation of light-duty vehicle regulations, including the Advanced Clean Cars and Zero-Emission Vehicle regulations, and the programs and policies that support their implementation. Patrick Duan is the Senior Vice President for BYD Motors. They're an American manufacturing company and a wholly owned subsidiary of BYD Company Ltd, which is a global technology company with more than $18 billion in revenue across the world and more than 220,000 employees. So very large, significant manufacturer in the clean tech space. Eric Salo is currently Senior Manager in Southern California Edison's e-mobility team, which develops new utility programs and influences emerging state policies that provide greater EV adoption and use. Since joining Southern California Edison in 2011, Eric has led diverse teams responsible for requesting more than $2 billion at the Public Utilities Commission on infrastructure and rebate programs to accelerate the deployment of passenger and goods movement electric vehicles across Southern California. So since we have three organizations that are really leaders in electrifying heavy-duty vehicles, I want to start out with some discussions in that area. So Patrick, BYD is one of the leading manufacturers for electric trucks and buses globally and here in the US. So maybe to start out, can you tell us a little bit about your work and how it fits into the broader effort that California is leading to electrify heavy-duty vehicles? And I would particularly welcome your thoughts on electric buses, since it seems like those are really moving very quickly right now.
Certainly, thank you, Joe. First of all, thanks for having me and BYD on this discussion. And like what you just introduced, BYD is a pioneer, and we're one of the world's leading battery and EV companies for electric cars, buses, and trucks, forklifts, and also advanced elevated rail system. I think BYD's total solution with zero-emission ecosystem dovetails with California's push to electrify, especially in the heavy-duty vehicle space. And globally to date, we have produced nearly a million plug-in electric passenger cars and delivered about 80,000 electric buses and mid to heavy-duty electric trucks. In North America, our headquarters is based in Los Angeles, and we established a electric bus manufacturing facility in LA County in 2013. And that facility is designed to produce up to 1,500 electric buses a year. And since 2014, we have delivered about 500 electric buses and over 200 electric trucks in the US. We currently have over 50 electric bus customers in North America that have accumulated over 18 million miles of zero emission transportation service. We have also opened 7 service centers across the country, providing parts and technical support to our customers. And I think as to electrification of global mass transit is progressing very quickly and rapidly, we see many of the American largest fleet operators and transit agencies have announced their goal and target for like partial or full electrification. And I think at the same time, we also face hurdles and challenges like infrastructure, policy, regulation to further fast grow or quickly grow and open up a wider adoption for electric, commercial electric vehicles in the US. Thank you.
Thanks. So Eric, Southern California Edison has really taken a leadership position building charging for heavy duty vehicles. I'd suggest it's one of the real signature initiatives for the utility right now. I wonder if you could talk about that and why you felt broader you, Edison, that this was an important area for Edison to really step into and how it's been going.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, thanks for having me on the panel and allowing me to talk about what SCE is doing. In the EV space, you're right. Electrification broadly, whether it's building electrification, but really started with transportation electrification, became one of the pillars that the company is focusing on really around the 2014-2015 timeframe. And since then, we've really identified our focus in this space is to accelerate adoption. And we do that in several different ways. So the focus really is around providing availability, really thinking about charging stations, availability of charging stations, affordability, looking at the rates that EVs charge at, as well as affordability of vehicles through different incentive programs, awareness, so focused on market education and outreach of what EVs are, how do you fuel from the grid, the paradigm for fueling your car is different, when is the right time to charge a vehicle, et cetera. And then finally, accessibility. So that's making sure that we have an equitable distribution of this technology and the benefits of this technology across all of our customers in the communities that we serve. So those 4 A's, availability, affordability, awareness, and accessibility are what all of our programs fit into. And by 2025, as Joel mentioned, we will have invested $2 billion just in Southern California on infrastructure and through incentive programs to support not only light duty, but also medium and heavy duty EVs. On that note, the Charge Ready Transport program, which launched in 2019, is really our flagship program for commercial, medium, and heavy duty vehicles. This is a 5-year infrastructure program for goods and people movement. So buses are included in this as well. And what we're doing in this program is really thinking about the affordability and the availability to these types of customers, and then the equitable benefits of electrifying the goods movement. And so we're providing what we we refer to as the make ready for the charging stations to be installed at sites or at public locations. And what a make ready is all of the traditional utility infrastructure. So think distribution service and a transformer up to the customer site. But then the make ready goes beyond the customer site onto the customer property, which is an area that the utility previously stopped at. And we fund the civil work, the hardware like wires and panels and conduit, and then the civil work, as I mentioned, all of the trenching and construction to put in these charging stations. Then also provide a rebate on the charging station as well. And so this really takes away all of the complexity as well as the upfront cost. That's a significant barrier to deploying these charging stations. As I mentioned, it's a 5-year program with a target of deploying 8,500 fleet vehicles like trucks, buses, and other non-road equipment. So forklifts are included in this. Essentially anything that's not a passenger vehicle that has wheels is eligible for this program. And to date, we have applications for around 2,300 unique vehicles at almost 100 different sites in the application. Now, not all of these are going to go through the entire process and actually deploy, but we're well on our way to meeting our 8,500 goal, which is really a drop in the bucket when, we're going to talk about later the goals for the state and the broader deployment. But to give you a little flavor of what's in those 93 sites and those 2,000 plus vehicles, about half of them are public agencies like transit fleets or school districts or other government operations. And this isn't really surprising because launching in 2019, really the first movers were buses. And so that's the main volume of vehicles that we're seeing, and that's going to transition as we see more heavy duty vehicles and medium duty vehicles introduced. And then 30% of the vehicles are focused on medium duty trucks. Again, this makes sense as you get heavier and heavier, it gets more complicated and more costly. And so the heavier duty trucks are just a little bit further behind. As Patrick mentioned, BYD and other providers have a whole series of different types of vehicles that they introduce, and those heavy duty trucks are coming. We have a lot of regulation in the state that's going to be pushing that on the production side as well as the demand side. And so we're really happy to be providing this program. We're going to continue at the Charge Ready Transport program. We're going to continue supporting electrification into the future as essentially almost everything gets transitioned over to electric fueling.
Thanks. So I want to ask you a little bit more about the sort of make-ready model. So right now, as the federal government is thinking about building out a lot of particularly DC fast charging nationally, and Plug-in America has been advocating for them to think of it as creating a sort of a holistic national infrastructure for DC fast charging. Do you think the make-ready model is appropriate for that? I mean, that's something that we've been fans of, is sort of using that model nationally, that it's kind of a good fit.
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen tremendous success in our pilot programs for light duty, and then some of our unique pilot programs for medium and heavy duty. And really, customers love these programs. The complexity that you have to get over the hurdle, especially at these early stages of the market, is a lot. Interconnection, what type of construction, how fast of a speed do I need the charging stations to be? We're really there as a partner, providing that support in the early stages of the market. What's also important to think about on the make ready is we're going to shift from the traditional gas station model. We will have that type of a fueling model in the future, but the value and the benefit that you can get from electricity is to fuel trucks overnight when they're not being used, or vehicles when they're not being used, and electricity is inexpensive. And so that's going to push fleets and push EV owners, future EV owners, to having infrastructure installed at the place where trucks park, as opposed to now where you have to go to a special fueling location that could take away time, that goods could be delivered, etc. And so we think that the make-ready structure is something that's going to continue going forward. There are challenges when you move out of California and you think about this nationally. We had limitations in California that you couldn't resell electricity, otherwise you would be classified as a utility. And so we had regulations that change that, and that's why you see public fueling stations. And so that's something to think about on a national basis, these other hurdles. But from what utilities can and should be doing, the make-ready infrastructure piece, I think, is going to be the model that other utilities are going to use, and to be quite frankly, are using in applications that you've seen to date and will be going forward.
Thanks. So, Analisa, let's keep talking about heavy-duty vehicles. So, with the advanced clean truck rule, California wants to have 100% electric trucks by 2045, which is in 24 years, which is pretty ambitious. So right now you don't really see a lot of electric trucks on the road. So I work mostly in the sphere of electric cars, and electric cars have been around commercially for about a decade, and we still have a very long way to go. So electrifying all these trucks seems like pretty ambitious. So can you talk about how that's going and how the state sees us getting to that goal over that time period?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, my background is primarily light duty as well, but that's going to be changing. Starting Friday, I actually have a new job title. I'll be in charge of CARB's zero emission infrastructure. I'll be the zero emission infrastructure specialist, and that's to cover board-wide, sector-wide activity related to infrastructure. So I'm starting to really focus on heavy duty and the role that both the regulations that we have in place and the infrastructure that's needed to support them will play. We've really seen a dramatic increase in available vehicles across many sectors, apart from light duty. New players in the space are demonstrating successful commercially available vehicles, and traditional companies who have historically focused exclusively on internal combustion technology are now shifting to making ZEV technologies commercially available. The adoption of the advanced clean trucks regulation in June of last year, we now have a schedule for market-ready vehicle introduction. Like the light-duty ZEV regulation, this ensures there's supply, and manufacturers will need to partner with consumers to sell at a price point that develops a market that works for consumers, thus driving innovation and creating more choices or options for truck drivers and fleets. Manufacturers would be required to sell zero-emission trucks as an increasing percentage of their annual California sales from 2024 to 2035. And by 2035, zero-emission truck and chassis sales would need to be 55% of Class B and 3 truck sales, 75% of Class 4 through 8 straight truck sales, and 40% of truck tractor sales. But apart from the regulatory efforts, like light-duty vehicles, a number of factors are crucial to market success, including awareness, affordability, and infrastructure. California will be working hard to address those and other ZEV market ecosystem issues in the coming years. To help with that effort, our Office of Business and Economic Development, or GoBiz, recently published our ZEV Market Development Strategy. This document was developed with help from over 24 state agencies and focuses efforts and priorities towards making our ZEV goals a success. I think it's really telling that there are over 24 state agencies that will be engaged in making the ZEV market successful. As recent as several years ago, some thought it would be difficult, if not impossible, to have full-size, long-range battery electric SUVs and pickup trucks. And now there's seemingly a new product announcement each week. And for things like commercial delivery and city buses, the industry increasingly says it's inevitable that these will go electric. So we keep shrinking the challenge, and we think a healthy zero-emission future is achievable. And with the recent executive order and pressing community health needs, it is really inevitable. We recognize the global OEMs respond to widespread policy trends. Partnerships with other states and other national governments are critical to that effect. In 2020, a bipartisan group of governors representing 15 states from across the nation and the District of Columbia signed an MOU to accelerate new zero-emission medium and heavy-duty truck and bus sales by 2050. That diverse mix of states that includes California, Colorado, Connecticut, Hawaii, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, New Jersey, New York, North Carolina, Oregon, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, and Vermont, and Washington, as well as the District of Columbia, agreed to work collaboratively on policy. Several states are taking public action on the advanced clean trucks regulation itself: New Jersey, New York, Massachusetts, and Washington State, with others signaling interest. Several states are taking public action, international efforts like the Drive to Zero are organizing global action in the heavy duty zero emission space as well. And dramatic increase in vehicles across many sectors. New players in the space are demonstrating, getting my notes mixed up here. We're also working on the Advanced Clean Fleets regulation. This regulation will work on the demand side. This is perhaps where light duty and medium duty sectors differ most significantly. Advanced Clean Fleets is proposing to start with fleet applications most suitable for ZEVs and expand over time as more vehicle applications become available. So when I think about the implementation of heavy duty, medium duty applications in the commercial transportation sectors, we're seeing more and more commercial availability. And as we think about where there are challenges, most of that is really comes down to addressing infrastructure. So that's where I'm looking forward to working in that space and figuring out how we ensure that the infrastructure solution is present to overcome any hurdles that folks are foreseeing in specific sectors.
Thanks. So Patrick, I know that the heavy duty market is developing really rapidly in China. And of course, you guys work there as well as in the US. How would you compare what's happening in China, the pace of the market, with what's going on in the US?
I think that's a great question. I think from a policy standpoint, it's the strategy is very similar. I think for both countries, we feel like the EV policy, both countries focus on incentives, focus on regulations, focus on education awareness, continuous training, or a showcase of the EV technology and those readiness of the infrastructure, everything. I think a couple of things I want to mention that we feel like for scaling, like for larger quantity of EV getting on the road, I think definitely infrastructure, the incentive for infrastructure is crucial. And the other, I think for the vehicle, the programs are very, very similar. Like China has very similar programs like HVIP that we do in California, which is very effective. On top of that, I think what we have experienced in China is for infrastructure and ongoing, for example, operation and maintenance cost incentive, how to incentivize transit agencies or consumers to not only get benefit from buying a vehicle, but also get benefit for using electric vehicles, cars or buses or trucks. The more you drive, the more you use, the more benefit, the more incentive you get from the policy or from the government. And same thing for operation and maintenance costs. That's a big portion of the out-of-pocket cost for our customers or the transit agencies or consumers. Then how can we find a better way to incentivize those end users, either public or private, to see and benefit from using, maintaining, servicing, repairing an EV versus a conventional diesel or gasoline vehicle.
So do you see what are there any programs that you would highlight as kind of a model for incentives that really work to drive usage, as you said?
I think that there are several of them that I can mention the one of them is the charging infrastructure incentive, where for utility companies and also for charging station owners, they get ongoing benefit. It's similar to the LCFS, the low carbon fuel standard, kind of infrastructure or charging infrastructure incentive. That's very effective. And also for O&M cost, there are, for different cities in China, there are ongoing incentives to get additional benefit to those EV owners and drivers.
Okay. So with when we think about sort of medium heavy duty vehicles, there's so many different sectors and some different pieces. If we look out, I don't know, maybe let's say 2 or 3 years, what do you think is going to be first? Where are the segment of medium heavy duty market that is moving the fastest, that is kind of the most compelling? You know, if we go out, we're in 21 now. Let's say if we're looking out to 2024 and looking back, right now we don't see a lot of EVs. When we go out a couple of years, where are we going to see all the EVs? Like this, with medium and heavy duty vehicles, there's going to be one sector that really steps forward, and we're going to see, wow, there's suddenly all these electric buses, or I don't know what. I'm interested to see what each of you thinks in terms of where's the kind of early action going to be with those vehicles.
Yeah, I'm happy to start. I think it's going to be different in different places. So in California, in particularly in Southern California, I think you can look to the regulations that are going to be coming out. So we've got larger fleet sizes that need to be electrified. We've got port drayage equipment that needs to be electrified, et cetera. You know, as I mentioned, the obviously transport refrigeration units. There's a rule around that for electrification, which are the trailers that have the refrigeration unit on it for cold equipment, or for cold storage and like food transportation. I think what's going to happen is the buses are out front. You're going to see more and more movement on the bus space, and then it's going to be whatever is the lightest duty moving up to whatever is the heaviest duty. I mean, the economics on the heavy duty side are just so fantastic. I think it's going to be really hard once they start coming out. Patrick, I don't know if you've got more intel on that, but I think that we're going to see movement slowly, and then once it kicks in, it's going to be so fast because the economics of it, especially once you get over the initial barriers of like, how do I fuel? How fast do I fuel? You know, how do you drive this? How much does it cost? It's just really gonna take off. But I think from the smaller to the larger is what we're gonna see.
So like panel vans, because those are relatively small, like kind of UPS trucks, things like that.
Yeah, I mean, we're already seeing it. Look at the order from Amazon for the Rivian parcel vehicle and things like that. Just like when you look at the scalability and then also the cost for entry, I think that those are the places that it's going to happen. Now, I think we're leaving out right now the pickup truck market. So Ford is releasing their F-150 or announcing it next week. I think that that's going to be completely revolutionary with regards to availability in the market and usability. It's a little bit less on like the commercial space than we think about it with like goods movement, but that's just a huge segment, especially in California, for work actually getting done for work trucks. And so, you know, I think we're going to see it all over the place, but it's going to be those lighter duty ones first. Is what we're expecting. Interested to hear what the other panelists have to say.
I think I agree, Eric. I think another way we can look at this, Joel, to look at the a pattern where I think if you look at trucks and buses, those commercial vehicles, even if you count the volume is lower. It's about 10%. If you look at US, it's only about 10%. But if you look at the carbon emission from these vehicles, is actually almost 1/3. So from a greenhouse gas emission standpoint, in terms of effectiveness, I would say by focusing on these larger and commercial vehicles, by electrifying those vehicles first, would get a faster pace of reducing the carbon emissions. And also a lot of those vehicles, especially trucks and buses, they follow a fixed routes. So to our industry, I think in terms of electrification, those are low-hanging fruits. I think because they get the same routes for their daily operations, and they get charged at the same time at the same location. So it's better. It's easier, a lot easier to manage the routes and charging curves, and with utility demand charge, all those things. It's a lot easier to manage them. So I would say from that standpoint, we like to see a commercial fixed route kind of vehicle being electrified first, while we definitely should work hard on those lighter duty and consumer vehicles.
Mm-hmm. So fixed route means like what kind of vehicles? Like what would you imagine when you say that? That means.
Sorry, say buses. You have routes. You have fixed routes, buses, and trucks for ports, and trucks for airports. All those vehicles, many trucks today travel less than 20,000 miles a year, which is on an average less than 80 miles per day. That means by today's technology, on a single charge, most of the trucks can travel or can drive over 100 miles on a single charge. So for those vehicles, those trucks, and some of the buses, those vehicles should be replaced or electrified first. Those are the low-hanging fruits.
Right. So that technology is really here already.
Correct.
Okay, thanks. I don't know, Analisa, any thoughts on this or?
Oh, I agree with both Eric and Patrick that the transit and port trucks, drayage trucks, those are two prime sectors that are ready for electrification. They also have, in addition to their CO2 impacts, their impact to communities they travel through. If we're able to accelerate adoption of zero emission technologies in those sectors, it would have really dramatic benefits to communities that have been disproportionately impacted by poor air quality.
Right. So let's switch gears a little bit, and let's talk about the Biden administration and the different initiatives that they have been rolling out in the last couple of weeks, since there's so much interesting stuff going on right now. So one big piece of news is that they are reversing the Trump administration and are going to allow California to allow their waiver to go forward to implement the ZEV mandate. And this is not unexpected, but nevertheless, it's a really big deal. And I know people at the state are really excited about this. So Analisa, I wonder if you could comment on that, sort of what it means to the state, why it's important more broadly.
Sure. Yeah, it is a big deal. We've always felt that we had the authority to, under the Clean Air Act, to enact regulations that provide the necessary emission reductions in California to meet our health-based air quality standards, and for us to address our climate challenges. We have 7 of the 10 worst air polluted cities in the nation. And so being able to address that with the regulations that achieve emission reductions from mobile sources, which account for much of our air pollution problem, is super important to us. And having the waiver restored also helps clear the path for adoption of our next phase of our advanced clean cars regulation. We're looking at setting standards for post-2025 for the zero emission vehicle regulation, as well as our low emission vehicle criteria, pollutant, and greenhouse gas standards. We held a workshop last week in which we laid out a path for light duty vehicle ZEV adoption between 2026 and 2035. And we also included some provisions that would basically mature the market for light duty vehicles, including warranty and battery durability, battery state of health, and open access to repair information. So we need to be working diligently on the process of developing that regulation in order to not skip a beat in the rollout plan between our current regulations that take us to 2025 and our goal of reaching 100% new car sales by 2035. So this has been a real positive. We're excited.
Thanks. So the other big piece of news recently was that Biden committed the U.S. to cutting our greenhouse gas emissions by 50% by 2030 off of a 2005 baseline. So he didn't say anything about transportation specifically in there, but obviously that's packed in there. There's a lot of assumptions about transportation that are built into getting to a goal like that. So I wonder if any of you could comment on that and the role that transportation plays in that, and sort of what are the implications for transportation if we're going to achieve something like a 50% cut.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the nail on the head, Joel. Like, you can't get that cut without electrifying transportation or some type of zero emission transportation or lower emission, whether it's transferring from personal vehicles to buses and that type of a thing. But I think electrification is going to be play a bigger role. In California, 50% of the state's emissions come from transportation or transportation adjacent sectors. And so when you think about, what is the big elephant that we need to cut down, like where does it come from? It's really in this space. And one of the areas that, or how we're thinking about it, is that the light duty space is really the carbon reduction space, simply because of the scale, the tens of millions of vehicles or hundreds of millions in the country, where the heavy duty space is more of an air quality play. And that's really important because the emissions per mile from heavy duty trucks of nitrogen oxides or particulate matter, these things that are really bad for overwhelmingly low income communities and communities of color. That's where the value from electrification in that heavy duty space. But on the light duty side, like it's happening. It's going to keep moving. There's I've been saying for years that this market will take off when there's really sexy cars, and there's really sexy cars coming out that aren't just Teslas, right? And then I mentioned the F-150 again, like that's the most popular car in the entire country. And so if we're moving into these other segments instead of just light duty, and so I think that is really achievable. I think embedded in that reduction is also more greening of the actual electric sector and generation, and the economics are playing out. You can't build a coal plant right now. Coal plants are getting shut down even if they've already been purchased because it's less expensive to transition to renewables. And so there's a lot of issues in getting to that place and grid management, but I think it's already happening, and that 50% goal reduction, especially from a 2005 baseline, is absolutely I think achievable. It's going to take lots of work. I don't want to understate it, but from our view, and especially what we're doing in California, we're going to exceed that, and so other states will follow.
Any other comments on that?
Yeah, sure. Just to echo what Eric just said and quantify that, like today's transportation sector generates about 1/3, like about 30% of the total greenhouse gas emissions in the U.S., which is the largest share of greenhouse. So to meet the greenhouse gas emission by a reduction by 50% goal, I think transportation reduction is crucial. It's definitely crucial. That means private sectors like BYD, the technology companies and utility companies, policymakers need to really work together to find a rapid path for the implementation of the regardless light duty or heavy duty implementation of these programs and showcase execution of all these great green programs.
Huh. So one thing I've been thinking about is what if the state achieves this, what are the implications for the LCFS program? You know, when I think about LCFS, there's a lot of people that are watching today that are either buyers or sellers for LCFS credits. This is going to have some huge implications for that program, and a lot of stuff is going to shift around. Any predictions, you know, in terms of the market, like how that's going to impact both the sort of market supply and demand of LCFS credits, and then also of the sort of new pathways and like credits from electricity and things like that?
I feel like I should have the answer to that, but I don't.
No.
It's not an area that I'm super familiar with within our programs.
Okay.
I would say today, Joel, the LCFS is playing a critical role in our industry. A lot of our customers, they take significant benefit from that program. Basically, the concept is the more you drive, the more you install, the more charging station you install, the more credit that you get, and then the credits is getting more and more valuable. So I definitely see this is critical, and this is very important when we get on the scale to further incentivize, encourage more operators and customers to switch or to start the electrification today.
Yeah, I think that LCFS is playing the role that it was supposed to play. You're seeing, especially if you're, let's take the electric bus situation. A lot of fleets are seeing that they're generating more revenue from the LCFS credits than they're paying in electricity. So essentially, they're being paid to transition these vehicles over, which I mentioned the economics. You're going to see something similar, I think, in the heavy duty space, depending on how you're feeling and when you're feeling, et cetera, right? Caveat, caveat, caveat. But this is the market that is creating this, especially in the early stages here. As more people come in, I think that you're going to see more credits being generated. The utilities generate a significant amount of credits and have to return that back to customers. So all of the IOUs, the investor-owned utilities in California, we've launched a program for an on-the-hood rebate for new light-duty vehicles. We're going to be filing applications for a series of programs in June. So people keep a watch out for that. So there's going to be incentive programs and different types of activities to encourage adoption there. And so that's really fantastic from an early market. As we move later, if the regulation continues to ratchet the stringency on the regulated entities, not going to see a change. We're going to continue to see this as a revenue source, but every time that regulation comes up for debate or change, it's very active. And so we'll see what happens in the future, but right now and for the next several years, it is absolutely playing the role that it was meant to play, and is a fantastic boon for moving along the nascent market.
Right.
Yeah,
I guess I'm wondering.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to add that also on the hydrogen side, LCFS has played a significant role in making hydrogen station development something that private industry is ready to take on with or without government grants. So that's another example of where it's definitely playing the role it was intended. But like Eric said, I don't know what happens when there are so many credits, and where the regulation stringency goes in the future.
I guess what I'm wondering is, if you have fewer people driving on gasoline and diesel and more people driving on electric, it seems like there's going to be more credits chasing less demand. It might actually cause the price of credits to start dropping if that really happens.
And that might be where the role of future amendments to the regulation come in, but I don't know where our agency stands on that currently.
Right. I don't know. I'm just thinking about it as a sort of supply and demand question. Right.
Yeah, I definitely think that could be the case. We're seeing credits trading essentially at the ceiling of what was set in the regulation, and so and that's coming from 2012, 13, 14, 15 when they were $18. Now they're $198. Even a drop of 50%, you're still generating significant revenue to be used to incentivize customers, whether they're generating their own or revenue for utilities to implement programs.
Okay. So one other big thing that I wanted to chat about is that recently 12 governors came out, both Democrats and Republicans, and called on the federal government to set a goal of having 100% zero-emission light-duty vehicles by 2035, which also happens to be the UN target globally and the target for a number of other countries. As Analisa mentioned, California has just put out a draft regulation of how the state gets to 100% ZEVs by 2035. China, I think, has a goal of having, I think it's 50% electric and the rest hybrid by that year. I would sort of invite any comments on sort of this year, on 2035, as that seems to be a year that people are kind of rallying around. If it's achievable, if that'll, what's the implication for the overall climate change efforts that we're, trying to, get to zero by 2050.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I think it's definitely achievable. SCE in 2019 released a report called Pathway 2045, which is a vision for carbon neutrality in California by 2045. We've got in that, like essentially 80% of all light duty vehicles being zero emission. 6% of heavy duty vehicles by 2030, almost 40% by 2045. So you're talking about like tens of thousands of heavy duty trucks, millions, tens of millions of light duty. And this model is purely based upon economics right now. So barring significant advancements in technology, which to be honest, I think are going to end up happening as battery costs continue to reduce. And so I think that number from a California perspective is absolutely achievable. I think I have a less view on the national side. I don't know, Patrick, if you have more exposure on expectation there.
I agree, Eric. I think from technical standpoint, it's definitely achievable. I think it's going to be determined by how fast we can roll out a program that can rapidly expand the charging infrastructure, and the volume would be a big factor for things like what Eric mentioned, the battery cost. It's chicken and egg, right? You need to roll out the programs fast where you generate volume to help the OEMs to reduce the cost, because it's just happens automatically when you get the momentum. I think the key to this 2035 goal is how we can quickly generate the momentum to have the utility having more bandwidth to roll out the utility upgrades for infrastructure expansion, and then for the OEMs, for the private technology companies to further reduce or be more competitive on the cost from cost perspective.
Yeah, I think there are a number of factors, but I do believe that it's achievable. And I think the more jurisdictions that communicate their intention, either through statements or policies or regulations, that they believe that reaching 100% is achievable and it is their intent to get there, that sends a stronger signal to the manufacturers to really focus investment on zero emission technology as opposed to traditional ICE technology. And so the more vehicle types that and models that are made available, the more interest is generated in the public in buying a ZEV. But the other aspect that is super important there is infrastructure, because as excited as somebody might get about the latest EV that's coming out, if they don't know where they're going to fuel it, they're not going to buy it. So we talked a lot over the years about a chicken and egg, whether the infrastructure comes first or the vehicles come first. That's done. We're done. It's infrastructure. It has to be there at this stage. We've gone past the early rollouts of infrastructure that proved how it works or where it works. Now we just have to blanket the state, the country with infrastructure, so that that's not the question. Then we can focus on availability and awareness, accessibility, things like that. So focusing on infrastructure, stating our intent, those are two key things, I think.
Okay, thanks. We've got about 10 minutes left. I would invite questions from the audience, from the attendees. If people have a couple of good, insightful questions, I would welcome those. And if you could also sort of identify yourself and your organization in your question would be great. So you can just type those into the chat box. And then also, I would welcome questions from any of you all, from the panelists, if you have sort of questions to toss out to the rest of the group. Happy to have that discussion now while the attendees are pondering their thoughtful questions for us.
While we're waiting for the questions, this is not a question, but I want to put my hands together for what Analisa just mentioned about the chicken and egg question is already answered. It's the infrastructure. So we can focus right now. It's really crucial, I think, especially for light duty. It's really true. I think 2035 is just 15 years or 14 years away. And for those new adopters for EVs, is really those potential consumers want to see where they're going to charge the vehicles before they get comfortable for getting the vehicles recharged. It's challenging for them to purchase an EV. So it's great that the question is answered, and we now focus on the infrastructure and getting them rolled out quickly.
Yeah, I've been reading studies for a decade or more that say the faster we implement infrastructure, the cheaper it will be in the long run. The key is to build capacity so that utilization can grow rapidly. Otherwise, it's death by 1,000 cuts to put in just a little bit and sort of eke out marginal utilization. So yeah, we need to focus on it now and do it quickly and really saturate.
It's better to just rip off the Band-Aid and kind of go for it.
It's cheaper.
And at the same time, technology continue to improve over time. Battery technologies, energy density, cost, and also charging technologies. While we're doing this, all these technologies are going to improve significantly over time. So I think the future is definitely bright. The goal is achievable when we focus on those critical aspects of the rollout plan.
So I'm not seeing any questions in the chat. Jenny, are there questions that you're seeing that I'm not seeing for any reason? Just want to double check I'm not overlooking anything.
Hi, Joel. I have not seen any questions, but just to point out, where attendees should go, you should have a control panel box for this GoToWebinar, and there's a drop down for chat, and you can just type in your question there and send it off to the group.
So I've got, a little tagline that I like mentioning, that I've got a question for Patrick while we're waiting. I think what's really fantastic about EVs is that because the grid's getting cleaner, this is especially the case in California, but it's going to be across the country. The EV is the only vehicle that's going to be cleaner on the last day that you drive it than it was on the first day that you drove it. And so when we are really thinking about what are we doing here, we're not just selling EVs, right? The goal is the climate impact reduction. It's new technology, it's cost savings for consumers, et cetera. I think that this is the transportation sector is really the linchpin in conjunction with the electric sector. Obviously, the utility guy is saying the electric sector is most important, but I think that that's an important piece to think about, and that these vehicles are going to be on the road for 20, 25 years potentially when you look at this technology. But I've got a question for Patrick on like what you're seeing across the country, and if there are certain markets that are accelerating faster than others, and like what they're doing that might be different, or how you guys focus on different regions from a manufacturer standpoint. Because I think both Analisa and I are so California centric. We only have high level views of the rest of the country.
That's a great question. First off, I think definitely our focus right now, that's when 2010, when we relocated our North American headquarters to LA. That's why, because California is the leader. Here is the market that we started to focus on. But as we get more vehicles in the field, we start to see other states or the rest of the country start to generate more momentum in terms of adopting electric vehicles, buses, trucks, for sure. For the buses, definitely transit agencies with the incentive get from federal and local government, we start to see a lot of momentum to get any of future procurement of new buses to be zero emission buses, either hydrogen or battery electric vehicles. Same thing for the truck side. I think the ports, airport, we start to see like the drayage truck, the yard tractor, all those low hanging fruit I was mentioning. I think we definitely start to see nationwide momentum to get there. Private sector, I think everyone is focusing on economic benefits more than although taking all those incentives or regulations, but it's moving. It's definitely moving.
Great. Well, I think that we are about at the end of our hour now. So I want to thank the three of you. This was a really great conversation. I actually learned a bunch from you all. And thank you to the Climate Action Reserve for having us all here, and for attendees for sticking around. And, appreciate everyone's time. And, we'll look forward to doing this again next year, hopefully.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.